Disclaimer.
Friends of killers, what were your first thoughts after finding out? Did you think they seemed off before? I knew something had happened, quieter than he usually was. He kept zoning out / staring into space. For context, it was an accident, but he was scared and covered it up, not very well, though, because the cops found the body. He was suspiciously invested in the case. I was actually with him watching TV when the news announced they had found the body. He started sobbing and I was like, dude, did you know her? No, it's just really sad that family lost their grandma. I chalked it up to him losing his own grandma mo or two prior. It didn't even occur to me that it happened like 2 miles from his house. He was doing a bad job at work and kept getting distracted. When the police showed up at our work, they came over to him and said they had some questions to ask him, and they didn't even get another word out before he collapsed, started bawling and spilled everything out that happened. He confessed everything right there on the shop floor. It would later come out that he'd written a 2-part apology letter and put it in a Ziploc bag and gone back to leave it with the body. They asked the front office for a document with his handwriting on it, and it was a perfect match. There was damage to the front of his pickup along with DNA in the bumper. The family understood it was an accident and did feel sorry for him. He got off with a couple years in prison, which he only served half. When he got out, the first thing he did was have his pickup destroyed at a junkyard. He said he couldn't bear to look at anything from that night. Sadly, this would bear true as he committed suicide not too long after. The family had forgiven him and were actually one of the last people he called before taking his own life. He wasn't a bad guy, it was just an accident. Similar story in my life. My friend killed her brother and partner in a car accident due to negligence. She had to drive from the south of the UK to the north to pick them up for an event, and she decided she was fine to drive back the same day but fell asleep at the wheel. When the police arrived, she was screaming, "What have I done?" over and over, and fully admitted to the accident. They gave her a suspended sentence to deal with the trauma. When we met, she had hair missing all along the side of her head, which grew back thin because of the stress. And she was very open to anyone who would ask her about it. But she was riddled with guilt and self-hatred and would hurt herself. One Christmas she came to our works party, went home that night and killed herself. She had written us a letter and left a voicemail. The local paper wrote the story in a way that made it look like she did it just to escape jail time, when in actuality she was far more haunted and heartbroken by what she did than anyone could have known. So yeah, fuck you, the Herald, and rest in peace to my friend. This story is a heartbreaking reminder of how fragile life can be. In one moment, an unfortunate accident happened and the resulting chain of events led to the death of an innocent person and a tarnished life for the person responsible. It's clear from this story that accidents can have far-reaching consequences and serious impact on those involved. We should all learn from this tragedy, not only to be more careful in our daily lives, but also to remember to show mercy and compassion towards those who make mistakes. Went to school with a dumbass we'll call Jeff. Wasn't a killer, but was always creepy AF. He would also always say and do dumb shit to get a ruse out of people. I wouldn't really say he was a friend, but being both kinda loser kids, we hung around the same circles. One day, he said, "Haha, I got a lady locked in my basement, haha." It being Jeff, everyone just shrugged it off or called him a dumbass, thinking he was just being an idiot. 1 year later, news story breaks. Turns out him and his uncle had a lady living at their house against her will. No shit. A former coworker killed his mom, over a decade since I last saw him. The guy always seemed a little off, not just socially, but he had a ton of nervous tics, like his hands and face was constantly twitching. I just assumed it Tourette's or something he was trying to control, and it might have been. But when reading articles about his trial, I learned a lot more about him. We were pages at a studio shortly after college, i.e., Kenneth from 30 Rock, and it turns out he had battled with schizophrenia while in college. Apparently, he would write letters to celebrities as if he knew them. He had a lot of treatment and a lot of support from his family, and was deemed okay to live and work on his own a couple of years later. Then, getting the job at the studio and seeing actual celebrities in person basically triggered his past delusions. Looking back, I can remember on a couple of occasions while we were working the audience for a show, he'd become still while seeing a celebrity on stage, with just a huge smile on his face as if he was in another world. He abruptly left the job and I never saw him again. Apparently, he went back to live with his family while they continued to support him. Not sure exactly what happened in the interim, but at some point he became suicidal and stole his dad's shotgun. He was in his own apartment while holding the shotgun when his mom came to the door, and in his unstable state, he shot her. The cops showed up. He fired a few shots at them hoping for a suicide by cop scenario, but instead he gave up. He's now serving time in prison, even though his own family advocated he be admitted to a psych ward. This is an incredibly sad story just all around. Wow. Reading about the trial was incredibly sad. The prosecution grilled his therapist on exactly why they didn't know he was likely to hurt himself or others. They had to say they just didn't see the signs and that they're not mind readers. His father and sister testified that they didn't think he was evil, and this was after he shot their spouse/parent. They really wanted him to be institutionalized. I later read the judge said he didn't think an institution wouldn't be suited to help him, but prison would. This also shocked the local community it took place. It was a small community and his mom was a teacher for decades there, so nearly everyone knew her. It infuriates me that we just throw drug addicts and mentally unstable people in jail. Our main goal should be rehabilitation for every citizen. Not just locking them away to rot, usually rotting with people who are actual hardened criminals, and that just creates more hardened criminals. But that goes into the whole privatized jail system and people making money off of it. It's honestly one of the things that pisses me off the most these days. Plus, half the people I talk to agree they should just be thrown in jail. As soon as I read about the tics, I knew bipolar or schizo would come up in this story. That part sounds like tardive dyskinesia, a movement disorder caused by long-term use of neuroleptic drugs, antipsychotics and antidepressants mostly. I myself suffer with it. It's not well known. I apologize, I can't resist the urge to mention it. Simply because someone suffering with it may not know what's happening and see this comment and piece it together. Not my friend, but my older sister's closest friend through childhood and high school, so she was like a second sister to me. Both developed major drug problems starting their mid-teens. My sister eventually decided she couldn't have her in her life anymore for the sake of her recovery. Years go by and she suddenly gets arrested for killing an old lady she was shoveling snow for. Apparently, the woman confronted her about having stolen her credit card and she beat her to death. There was never anything off about her. Just a normal teenage girl. Honor student, multiple sport athlete, well-liked, and unlike my sister never got in trouble at school. Drugs are a hell of a drug. I hope things are better for your sister. And you, I feel so bad for that old lady. She probably had family and kids and pets, and in an instant her life was taken because she wanted her card back that she needed. Gosh, I'm so sorry. I know having someone close to you do something bad is very rough, but I hope you family and sister are all doing well. Stay safe. Thanks. My sister doesn't seem to have the desire to really be sober, but she found a balance that's safe and sustainable for her. She's a much more present and loving sister, mother, and daughter now. I was afraid in the immediate aftermath that it'd send her into another relapse, but it just made her more determined never to go back. I'm really proud of her and should tell her more often. I was in a state-run psych ward while awaiting trial. I befriended a schizophrenic guy and we hung out daily. When he wasn't responding to the voices in his head, usually by cracking up laughing until teary-eyed, he was smart, charismatic, friendly, and pretty funny. Long story short, he got a weekend pass to spend the weekend with his family and murdered them all with a hammer. He also murdered the Chinese exchange student staying with them. While serving time, I had 2 different Shelleys in for murder. One was only 21, very intelligent, and was a very kind, generous and nice guy. He was a PCP dealer and started getting high on his own supply. After a week of smoking PCP, during a hallucination, he saw the world on fire and thought he was in hell. He ran home and kicked open his front door. His dad, also his best friend, was sitting in his lazy boy in his living room. My cellie thought it was the devil sitting on a throne, so he emptied his entire clip into his dad's chest at point-blank range. He had no idea what he did until the drugs wore off. His big bro caught a charge so he wouldn't serve his time alone. My cellie was 21 and was sentenced to 60 years, this was in Maryland. He was my close friend by the time I was released. I think of him often, but he asked everyone not to write or visit. The guilt was eating him alive and he wanted to remove himself from people's consciousness. A tragic story for sure. Another cellie served 18 years on a murder, got out, and within 2 weeks, was back in for murder and armed robbery. He was trying to go straight, but he linked back up with the old homies. One of them robbed a check cashing place and ended up killing the store clerk in a shootout. My cellie never even left the car, and had no idea what his boy was about to do. Both were charged with murder, and with his record, my cellie, and being on parole, he was given life. He was a wise and friendly man inside. He looked out for us youngsters and tried to use himself as an example of bad choices. Much love to him, as well as the family of the man that was killed. I've had an interesting life. What a shame, honestly. I got caught up in drug dealing heavily. Nothing big time, but I was in the streets every day and night, saw shootings, and got shot at. Knew friends who got murdered over drug beef CCT. That life is really just not worth it. Now I'm working a government union job and have a 2-year-old boy. Life is a gift, but sometimes shit just happens that's out of your control. I'm happy to hear that you made it out of that life and you're doing great now. Being a father of 2, there is no greater joy or motivation to do well in life than my kids, so I can appreciate your turnaround. Respect to you, brother. Happy your little boy doesn't have to experience the things you did, but will know your love instead. Peace be with you and yours. Yeah, it's a struggle, though. I never did drugs, but I was addicted to that life. I think about it all the time. It haunts me like a ghost because it made such an impact on my life. I don't worry or think much now with my son. I want better for him, and his success and future are all that consumes me. But every night, memories of my past still haunt me. A lot of people see all this shit on TV and rap, but man, it really isn't worth it. I've been to jail and it fucking sucks. Thankfully it was an insurance fine, so I didn't get drug charges. I did almost kill someone, but I somehow woke the fuck up and let him leave. I wish people would see that. There is so much more. But again, thank you for your kind words, brother. I wish nothing but peace and love to your family and loved ones. Wow, what a story. Glad you were able to change your ways. I grew up in a ghetto. I wasn't a drug dealer, but a lot of the people I hung out with were. People in my neighborhood were always in and out of jail and prison. It's easy to see how your friend accidentally caught a charge while he was out. People around me committed crimes so casually that you always had to keep an eye out so you weren't caught up in it. I tried never to ride with someone unless I knew them really well. We knew each other for about 3 years. He was best friends with the guy he killed and robbed selling Christmas trees one year. He was funny, a blast to be around, and never quick to anger. That being said, he did get into heavy drugs, coke, crack, but that was after the killing. He wasn't a suspect at that point. We just avoided him. Then one day he bragged about it while high and he was arrested. Never saw it coming. That's what scares the crap out of me and my friends, to be honest. A lot of trust in fellow human beings after that. My first job out of high school. The guy teaching me the job was a nice enough guy. Good at the job and had high standards. Actually, 25 years later, when I train new people for the industry, I still use some of his lines. He didn't turn up for a shift and wouldn't answer the phone. The boss went to check on him because we were worried it was out of character. His house was all locked up and dogs were loose. He had been cut out of his elderly grandmother's will for coming out as gay. He was from a very religious, wealthy farming family. He had gone to the grandma's rural house. Shot her 21 times with a gun he would have had to reload at least once. Wrapped her in plastic and tried to bury her in a dry creek on her property. She was a massive woman. He took her jewelry and cards and went on a joyride halfway across the country and come unstuck using her credit card to get a hotel 2 weeks after her body was found. He seemed normal until he wasn't. He did about 15 years in jail. And actually moved back to the same country town. He works as a store man at the grocery store. Hung out during my younger years with a girl that I would see frequently at parties in the art and music scene around the city that I live in, and she was always really nice. Later I found out that she went to jail for running her mother over with a car. Apparently they had been fighting on the lawn. I think her mom was trying to get her not to get in the car. Apparently she reversed and went forward again, the worst kind that you could think of. I honestly wouldn't have expected that from her even though we had had conversations about mental illness before. Really sad. My friend knew her a whole lot more than me, as in their parents were friends from a young age, and he said that she was very much a sociopath, but yeah. It's crazy. He wasn't a friend of mine, but I hung out a few times with Robert Long, who set fire to Palace Backpackers in Childers, Queensland, Australia, when we both stayed/worked out of there. 15 people died in the fire he set. I moved on in my travels 2 days before he set the place on fire. First thoughts were obviously holy fucking shit. Then you fear for the people you knew and had made friends with, scared for their safety. Then reality hits and you realize how close you yourself were to possible death. Then disbelief hits, as names of those murdered start being released and you realize you knew many of them, and had worked alongside them. Then it gets personal. You follow the news nightly as he goes on the run. You will the police to find him. You hope they kill the son of a bitch as he attempts to flee. And when they finally catch him and throw him in jail for the rest of his life, you say good, I hope you rot in there. And then you forget about it all, because you were lucky and neither you or any of your friends died. And then, years later, when you have kids of your own, it all comes back to you occasionally. Like when your kid starts talking about traveling one day and staying in backpacker hostels. You can also watch other videos by going to the channel. I will be pleased if you like them.